Welcome to the Yoga and Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley, a full-time yoga teacher and embodiment teacher here in Austin, Texas. I'm curious about all things yoga and. Today we will be exploring the subject of yoga and Vedic astrology. I'm especially excited about this episode because I will have my very first interview. Christine Rodriguez, creator and host of AstrologyNow Podcast, will be joining us today, and we will be discussing all about Vedic astrology. I hope you enjoy the episode, y'all. Joining us today on this episode is yoga teacher, social worker, and host of AstrologyNow Podcast. Please welcome Christine Rodriguez.
Hello.
So we're currently filming in my closet. It's kind of hilarious because the cats are jealous. So Christine, how are you today? What's going on?
I'm doing great, Ashley. I'm happy to be here. I'm always excited for an excuse to talk about astrology and hang out in a closet with you. So it's a win-win situation.
I've spent years in the closet, and I'm happy to be back in it. I don't know. Back in it with you, I guess.
Okay.
Makes it worth it.
Yes.
What's your go-to? We're going to get right into the questions, and these are heavy-hitting questions.
Okay.
Actually, the first two are warm-up questions because the viewers want to know all about you. So we know you're this amazing astrologer, but the real heavy-hitting question is, what's your go-to order at your favorite hometown restaurant?
I'm so glad that I prepared for this question. This is the one question that I felt I needed to properly prepare for. If you know Bolden Creek Cafe in Austin, Texas, there is a salad called Tarzan's Big Salad.
Oh my God, I love that salad.
And it's unbelievable. Mm-hmm. And if I could have it every day, twice a day, I would absolutely. It's my go-to every time. Best meal ever.
I love that.
Yes.
That is a spectacular answer. That's the best thing on the menu, in my opinion.
Agreed.
Okay, another hard-hitting question. You ready?
I'm ready.
What were you like as a teenager?
Oh my God. I was weird. I was so weird. So as a teenager, I got into astrology when I was really young. And so, sorry, the cats are knocking around. They knock around at my house too, so I'm just totally used to this. Yeah, so as a teenager, I was into astrology. I got into astrology in high school, and I was really interested in, at the time, I didn't verbalize it this way, but I was interested into like the esoteric realm. And I, printed out all of the different zodiac signs and cut them out and put them on a circle in my wall. And like my friends would come over and either they think it was cool or they think it was weird.
Oh, wow.
But, yeah, I was kind of weird in high school. I'm trying to think of other things. I had like one friend that I hung out with, just kind of introverted. But it was good. It was good personality cultivating.
Oh yeah.
To spend time alone and study esoteric stuff.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you and I would have been friends in high school.
I think we would have been friends in high school for sure.
So the love of astrology started in high school.
The love of astrology started when I was in my single digits, actually. My mom got me a book on astrology, and I actually was just fascinated at the idea of people being kind of like put into a month. Like I was fascinated at the idea of everyone who was born in one month being similar, and I actually started actively following astrology when I was, really little and just kind of investigating more whenever I had the opportunity. And then of course there was the internet, but I would say that my love of astrology and like deeper dive into astrology occurred when I was about 15. And I was seeing a counselor. She was my first counselor in high school, and she introduced me to this massive book on astrology. And that's whenever I got like really, really into astrology.
What's the name of that book so our viewers can check it out?
Sure. It's The Secret Life of Relationships, I want to say. And that book is actually Western astrology, and it breaks down personalities per week rather than month. And that's what I liked about it. And I started seeing synchronicities, but I still felt there were missing gaps. And then I met, of course, my Vedic astrology teacher when I moved to Austin. But that book, I believe, was The Secret Life of Relationships. Yes. And it showed compatibility with people like week to week rather than month to month.
Very cool.
Yes.
So we said when you moved to Austin.
When I moved to Austin, I eventually met my teacher, who is a Vedic astrology teacher. And that's when I got into Vedic astrology, and I actually started like reading charts, and just, my entire life fell into astrology essentially.
I love that. Okay, so I'm going to sound like a total broken wheel. What is that?
Record?
Broken record. But in a nutshell,
Okay.
like, a few words, what's the difference between, in your opinion, Western and Vedic? And I know we get asked this all the time.
It's a great question. It gets asked all the time because it's a really good question, and it's not like common knowledge. And so a very simple way of putting it, this is like ridiculously simplified, is that it's a different method of measurement and calculation. And Vedic astrology acknowledges the precise placement of the planets. And so as we know from science, there's a precession of the equinox. So the way in which the sky relates to the earth changes about 1 degree every 72 years. And so Vedic astrology acknowledges that precession, whereas Western astrology rolls the degrees back. And so there is about a 27-degree difference right now between Western and Vedic astrology. But Vedic astrology is the astronomically precise placement, cut and dry, of the planets.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. That's really cool.
Super cool.
Yeah. And you read my chart, and I was blown away at how accurate it was, and then also listening to your podcast, the nakshatras have been really blowing my mind lately. Yeah, I didn't know anything about that. For our listeners, would you want to explain that a little bit?
Okay. Oh, yeah.
Because that I've never heard of, and that seems unique to Vedic.
I believe that it is. I think that they may be referenced in Western astrology, though I've never heard a Western astrologer reference them. Whereas with Vedic astrologers, we bring it up constantly. It's a very important element of Vedic astrology. And so the nakshatras are the 27 lunar mansions in the sky. And so what you do is you take the 12 zodiac signs and you divide them into even more precise segments, giving you the 27 nakshatras within the 12 zodiac signs. And so, it's making it a little bit more specific, and it's amazing.
I love that because I've had a lot of Leos in my life, and you have the really loud Leos, and then you have the really quiet Leos, and that I guess explains that in a way.
Right. Yes.
And I've always wondered like why that was.
Wow.
And it wasn't until I heard this on your podcast I was like, oh, okay,
Right.
there's some insight.
Right. The other difference, I was going to talk about this earlier, the other big difference between Western and Vedic astrology is Western astrology is solar-based and Vedic astrology is lunar-based. And so the sun stays in a sign for a month. The moon stays in a sign every 2.5 days. And so Vedic astrology places more of an emphasis on the moon sign. But you're still going to have two people. The moon stays in a sign every 2.5 days, but the nakshatra is still going to change in those 2.5 days. So you can have someone with moon in Leo and be totally different than somebody else with moon in Leo. You've got to look at the nakshatra. And so, that's going to vary.
See. So it sounds like Vedic, it sounds, humans are complex. Vedic astrology sounds complex because humans are complex. Is
100.
that, yeah? Okay. I like it because it seems like you could spend your whole entire life studying Vedic astrology and there's something more to know. I mean, that being said, I personally don't know much about it. I've been learning it through you, but it just seems there's lots of layers, there's lots of depth.
I heard this teacher say this one time and it was hilarious. He's like, you could be studying astrology 700 lives and still not know everything about Vedic astrology.
Ooh, that kind of gives me chills.
And I agree. I mean, I invest so much time into this science and I still feel like I'm a baby and constantly learning and constantly discovering. And I know that this is going to be a lifelong journey. 700 lifelong journeys, apparently. And yeah, it's complicated.
I love it. Well, so not to get esoteric, but I'm curious, just personally curious, do you feel like because you're so young when you got into astrology, do you feel like maybe past lives you were also studying it, or?
I definitely think so. I mean, again, I've always been fascinated with the sky and astronomy, even before astrology. Like, there's always just been this connection to the ethers. And I think that I think you as well, if you come into this life and you have a strong pull to something, it's not your first rodeo a lot of the time. So like with yoga or astrology, Kundalini, meditation, all of that, if you feel a pull to do it, it's something familiar to you. It's interesting. It feels good. Like for me, I do feel that that's past life stuff.
Yeah, I have taught down dog before in past lives. That's for damn sure.
Here we go again.
Root the palms, lift the sitting bones up. But yeah, that was okay. So speaking of yoga, this is a yoga podcast, and we loosely tie everything back to yoga in some way.
Cool.
So being a beginner learning about Vedic astrology, I don't know anything about it other than just the little bit I've listened to your podcast. I don't know the origin or if it even ties into yoga. I would guess it would.
Sure.
But enlighten us.
Totally. I mean, it's all connected. All of the Eastern sciences are connected with Ayurveda and astrology, Kundalini, yoga postures, asana, pranayama. There are remedial measures in Vedic astrology which can manifest as breathwork or postures, even activating certain chakras, because the planets all have a chakra and they have mantras and they have mudras. And asana can definitely relate to planets as well. So if you have like a weak Saturn, it's like we'll give you a chant for Saturn. We'll give you a mudra for Saturn. There are Saturn postures. So, I mean, it's all connected.
Oh my God, you're right. Yes. I've only taken a few Kundalini classes, but I do remember the planets. There was a lot of that, and that makes so much sense. And you teach Kundalini.
I do. I'm certified to teach Kundalini. I would say I mostly teach Kundalini to myself.
Okay, you're practicing Kundalini.
Yes, and I will give remedial measures to clients.
Cool.
Yeah,
cool.
But I don't actively have like a Kundalini class.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so in your astrology career, what are you really curious about right now in your astrology profession?
Oh my God, there's so much all the time. I would say that something that I'm very curious about, and I have been for the past several months, is synastry and compatibility in Vedic astrology.
Oh, yeah.
And so I spend most of my days looking at least 3 couples charts, just kind of, looking at them, seeing what makes the relationship tick, seeing events in the relationship, like collectively, like how it impacts both of them. A lot of the time, like dasha system is like your planetary period. And then, of course, we have transits, which are how the planets in the sky right now are affecting your natal birth chart. And so looking at transits and dashas for each person and seeing how they match is just amazing to me.
Cool.
And then I'm also just always interested in world events and looking back, like right now there's stuff going on in the world. And so I go back and look at when other similar events occurred, and just seeing what was happening astrologically and how it correlates now. And there's always synchronicity. And so, but I mean, again, Vedic astrology is all around us. And so there's just so much to be curious about all the time.
Would you care to tell us about your latest YouTube thing you're doing, or you want to save that for later? I'm fascinated by that.
About the Alexandria Cosmic Critic. So I have a YouTube channel now, which is so weird for me. I love being behind a microphone and no one being able to see me. Like, I don't know.
I get that.
But I started a YouTube channel because Vedic astrology is so visual, and having a visual depiction of what I'm saying just helps everything come to life. And I did a YouTube video recently on my channel, AstrologyNow Podcast on YouTube. You can find it through my website, which we'll talk about later. But I look at the chart of Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and just briefly analyze them. And I'm not making any predictions. I do it from a neutral space. And I only do it in about half an hour. And so if you really want to dive into a chart, you can spend hours on it. So it's like a very brief little analysis, just looking at these 3 people and how they're going to relate to politics. And Yeah, it's fun. And I'm working on an in-depth analysis of the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez right now, and it's really interesting stuff.
I'm really excited to see that. I haven't seen your videos yet on YouTube specifically, but I'm wanting to check those out. Yeah, it sounds like there's a lot of creativity in this field that you're doing. There's like you said, you could study it for 700 lifetimes and still not get to every piece of it. And I want to ask, and it's kind of an interesting question, but is there something that in astrology that you wish, so somebody getting into it, that you wish you would have known when you first started? Any advice to give to budding astrologers?
Don't read your own chart.
Oh, yeah.
Try not to read your own chart in the beginning. I could have saved myself just a lot of anxiety of trying to read my own chart and spent that time looking at other charts. Forensic astrology is when you take charts of people and look at things that have happened to them in the past. Okay. And so spend more time looking at other people's charts, looking at their life events, and studying that. Because
you're learning. You haven't... I would imagine because you're in the process of learning, you need to get that honed in first before you go really, really personal and read your own, or?
For sure. Okay. And also, you're always going to be looking at your chart with biased perspective. You're going to look at everybody's chart with biased perspective. It's so hard to be neutral. And so why try to read your own chart? Like, just allow another astrologer to read your chart. Find another astrologer that you trust, let them read your chart, and then you can, it's fun to read your own chart. It's fun to see your own stuff. I just think that people can get very much wrapped up and consumed in themselves and their own fate and their own destiny and what's going to happen to them, that they're kind of missing out on really learning astrology. So just focusing on other people and looking from the past. And this is a very personal thing, and I, this isn't like shaming people who read their own chart, because I definitely, look at my chart. I just think that it's so much more helpful if you're trying to learn to invest that time towards learning like current events or people's life events or something like that. Like looking at those things are just going to teach you so much more.
Yeah, it seems like you could go down the rabbit hole with your own chart and learning that.
Sure. Yeah.
And I've always thought what I love about astrology is it helps you see your blind spot.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like that is such a necessary thing. And you need other people to show you where your blind spot is, I would imagine. And it seems like reading your own, it'd be harder maybe to see your own blind spot because you are biased. Or maybe not.
I love that. And I think it's totally true. And I think that something that I've really benefited from going to other astrologers is them telling me, like, this is your problem.
Like, it's like
this
therapy,
is your
man.
shortcoming.
Yeah.
Because once you're aware of your shortcomings, you can work with them. And if we're looking at our own chart, it's going to be so much more difficult to see those in the beginning, right? It's like as we get more mature with astrology and more comfortable with astrology and like planetary energies, it's a little bit different. But I think that in the beginning, just letting somebody else help you with your chart, like you said, pointing out those challenges, pointing out our own strengths for us, and then reading the charts of others. But we are going to be good case studies. I just think that if you're starting off, it could be helpful to look at mini charts.
Yeah.
Cool. Yep.
So, is there anything I have not asked you yet that you wish I did ask you in this interview?
I think that this has been great. I feel like this has been a thorough interview.
It has. And I love that my clothes are like all over our heads. We're in my closet, if you didn't get that earlier, and it's just kind of funny.
I record in my closet too, though. So like I'm at home right now. Like it's just your clothes, not mine. Yeah. And your cat's not mine. Like this is very comfortable for me.
This is how podcasters do it.
This is the secret of podcasting. Don't get the $100 mic.
Okay.
Just get into your closet.
I love it. So what's next for Christine? What is on your plate? It sounds like there's many things on your plate with astrology, but is there anything you haven't mentioned yet that's kind of you're moving next in your astrology? Or it's okay to not have an answer there, but...
Well, I'm in the process of being certified. I'm working towards my certificate to make it official, which many profound. Astrologers are not certified. And so I don't think it's like an end all be all, but it's an excellent process because it does force me to continue in-depth study, which I really like. And I'm going to be adding on a lot more in terms of in-depth analysis of individuals' charts, which is, again, that's another excuse to learn and then share, So it's just going to be a lot more of that. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep on trucking along with the podcast and YouTube.
I love it. Yeah. I think it's so awesome, and I love talking to you about astrology because you light up every time we talk about it. And then even on your podcast, I can hear kind of this like enthusiasm in your voice, and that gets me excited. And you really break it down and make it accessible for everybody. So Christine, where can we all find you?
Thank you. So on any major platform of podcasting, if you look for Astrology Now, which is one word, and then podcast, so AstrologyNow Podcast, you should be able to find my podcast. My website is innerknowing.yoga. There's no .com, it's innerknowing.yoga. My Instagram is AstrologyNow_podcast. My Twitter is AstrologyNow_.
Cool.
So those are all of the outlets.
And I'll put all this in the show notes so y'all can look and see that there. All right. Well, it's been great having you on, and I'm so excited. You're my first interview, and
I'm honored.
Oh, I love it.
Thank you.
We have to play chess soon.
Oh my God.
When it's safe to play chess.
When I'm recovered from the ridiculous butt kicking you gave me last time, maybe you
kicked my butt as well.
I beat you once.
No. All right. Well, guys, it's been a pleasure.
All right. Thank you so much.
Have you been wanting to start a podcast but not sure where to begin? If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. I really love how easy it is to create. Let me explain. First of all, it's free. There's a creation tool that allows you to record and edit right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you to all the major platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Anchor is spelled ANCHOR. That's all I have for today's episode about yoga and Vedic astrology. If you liked what you heard, please share with your friends. I also would love to have Christine on the podcast again. Let us know if you want us to do other subjects. If you would like to help the podcast, please leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcast. If you want to connect with us, our email is yogaandpodcast@gmail.com. The and is spelled out. YOGAAND podcast@gmail. Please follow us on Instagram, Yoga and Podcast, and let me know if you have any specific topics for the show that you want us to address. See you next week.